So this is my setup for measuring cane density, and we're going to measure it indirectly. The normal way of measuring something for density is density equals mass over volume. And since you need to have two constants, or a constant in that equation, we can't keep the volume constant because the cane absorbs water during this process, so the volume changes. So what we're doing instead is expressing density as a ratio. So the equation that we will use is the first mass, which will be dry mass. We'll measure it dry. The second mass is going to be the wet measurement, or the buoyancy that the cane has underwater, minutely forcing the weight of the scale to register lighter because there's an upward pressure of buoyancy on the rack under the water here. So we need two places to measure. Up here is where you measure it for dry. Okay, that's just like a normal scale. Then this rack under here, if you fit the cane under the rack, the buoyancy of the cane, or lack thereof, puts a lift on that rack and makes it appear to be less weighty on the scale. So you need to zero the scale out to start with. And a postal meter or something like that, a postal scale or a baking scale, isn't accurate enough to do it. You need something that registers two places, a hundredth of a gram accuracy. Okay. It's also important not to have this shaky, because that will show up when the water moves back and forth. So you need to have it on a solid surface. So let's start by measuring this piece of cane dry. So what I get there is 1.83 grams dry. Then lift it off the scale and just put it under the water under this rack. And it's expressed as a negative number. We don't worry about the positive or negative sign. We get rid of that for the purpose of this equation. So that's 0.67. And since we're not soaking cane here, get it out of there as soon as you can. If you're doing a series of cane, it's really good to have them in order so that you can keep track of which piece of cane has which number in it. Okay. So at this point we're done with the scale, and then I'll just show my math here. So we're going to add this together. So remember, it's mass 1, the dry mass, plus mass 2, which is the wet mass. Okay, so we add this together, and we've got 2.50 grams for our combined masses. Okay, then what you do now is you divide 1.83 by 2.50, and I'll do that on the calculator so it's easier to calculate. So that was 1.83 divided by 2.50. And that's in range. I can actually use this piece of cane. My range for gouged pieces of cane is between 0.69 and 0.74. So that's a usable piece. So more dense cane would be a higher number, less dense cane would be a lower number. Okay, so an important part of cane selection is testing for hardness. A hardness tester does not identify great pieces of cane. What it does is it helps you eliminate pieces of cane that will not be usable because they're either too soft or too hard. The important thing about getting a hardness tester and using it is that you need to use a little trial and error first to find the numbers that work best for you. So you're going to need to make some reads from a variety of hardnesses to find out what works best for you. But once you get a range that works well for you, it can really save a lot of time. So what I always do is, for me, the most important part of the read to know the hardness of is where the tip will be. So marking 60 millimeters from the end where the fold will be is a good way to get a good measurement to start off with. The other part you need to do is to be sure, especially if you use an elliptical gouge, that you put the indicator right down the center of the length of the cane gouge, so that you're not testing a thin part, but you're testing it at the center. So the way to do this with this hardness tester is to put it under the indicator and then bring the piston down onto the piece of cane, holding it gently in place, and then zeroing out the dial like that, and then pushing it down all the way so that the spring action puts a little divot in the cane. And what we're getting here is a measurement of the depth at which that divot goes. So for me, this is too soft a piece of cane. My good range with this kind of a hardness tester is somewhere between 14 and 16, and this is coming in at what is it, 23, I think. So this one would be one to set aside for later years, because cane definitely tends to harden up a bit as time goes by. So I will throw away pieces that are too hard, because they will never make good reeds, but softer pieces can be used later on.